I am Ben Jacobeen, and I'm a senior of Pope John Paul the Great, and I am reading from Chapter 2 of Nichols, Nickleby, where Mr. Nickleby and Noggs are discussing as they're waiting for a guest to arrive. "Was that 12:30, Noggs?" said Mr. Nickleby in a sharp and grating voice. "Not more than 5 and 20 minutes by that." Noggs was going to add public house clock, but recollecting himself substituted regular time. "My watch has stopped," said Mr. Nickleby. "I don't know for what cause." "Not wound up," said Noggs. "Yes, it is," said Mr. Nickleby. "Overwound, then," rejoined Noggs. "I can't very well be," observed Mr. Nickleby. "Must be," said Noggs. "Well," said Mr. Nickleby, putting the repeater back in his pocket, "perhaps it is." Noggs gave a peculiar grunt, as was his custom at the end of all disputes with his master, to imply that he, Noggs, triumphed, and as he rarely spoke to anybody unless someone spoke to him, fell into a grim silence, and rubbed his hands slowly over each other, crackling the joints of his fingers, and squeezing them into all possible distortions. The incessant performance of this routine on every occasion, and the communication of a fixed and rigid look to his unaffected eye, so as to make it uniform with the other, and to render it impossible for anybody to determine where or what he was looking at, were two among the numerous peculiarities of Mr. Noggs, which struck an inexperienced observer at first sight. "Going to London Tavern this morning," said Mr. Nickleby. "Public meeting?" inquired Noggs. Mr. Nickleby nodded. "I expect a letter from the solicitor respecting that mortgage of Mr. Ruddle's. If it comes, it will be here by 2 o'clock delivery. I shall leave the city about that time and walk to Charing Cross on the left-hand side of the way. If there are any letters, come and meet me and bring them with you." Noggs nodded, and as he nodded there came a ringing at the office bell. The master looked up from his papers, and the clerk calmly remained in his stationary position. "A bell," said Noggs, as though in explanation. "At home?" "Yes." "To anybody?" "Yes." "Do the talks gather?" "No." "Let 'em call again." Noggs gave vent to his usual grunt as to say, "Oh, that's so," and the ring being repeated went to the door, whence he presently returned, ushering in by the name of Mr. Bonney, a pale gentleman in a violent hurry, who, with his hair standing up in a great disorder all over his head, and a very narrow white cockade tied loosely round his throat, looked as if he had been knocked up all the night, and had not dressed himself since. "What's here, Nickleby?" said the gentleman, taking off a white hat, which was so full of papers, with scarce a stick upon his head. "There's not a moment to lose. I have a cab at the door. Sir Matthew Pupper takes the chair, and 3 members of Parliament are positively coming. I have seen 2 of them safely out of bed. The third, who is a Crockford's honour, has just gone home to put the clean shut on, and take a bottle or 2 of soda water, which will certainly be with us in time to address the meeting. He's a little excited by last night, but never mind that. He always speaks to stronger thoughts." "Seems to promise pretty well," said Mr. Ralph Nickleby, whose deliberate manner was strongly opposed to the vivacity of the other man of business. "Pretty well," echoed Mr. Bonney. "It's the finest idea ever started. United Metropolitan Improved Hot Muffin and Crumpet Baking and Punctual Delivery Company. Capital, 5,500,000 shares at £10 each. Why, the very name will get the shares up to premium in 10 days." "When they are at a premium," said Mr. Ralph Nickleby, smiling. "When they are, you know what to do with them as well as any man alive, and I'll bark you quietly out at the right time," said Mr. Bonney, slapping the capitalist familiarly on the shoulder. "By the by, what a very remarkable man that clerk of yours is." "Yes, poor devil," replied Ralph, drawing on his gloves, "though Newman Noggs kept his horses and hounds once." "Aye, aye," said the other carelessly. "Yes," continued Ralph, "and not many years ago either. But he squandered his money and invested it anyhow, borrowed at an interest, and in short, he had a first throat full of himself, and then a beggar. He took to drinking and had a touch of paralysis, and came here to borrow £1 or 2 in his better days. I had done business with them," said Mr. Barney with a meaning look. "Just so," replied Ralph. "Could have lent it, you know." "Ah, of course not,"